much for joining us this evening. We have Olivia Martinez Hauge joining us. That's going to talk about emotional regulation. What is it and how do we support it? Olivia is a licensed occupational therapist with over 20 years of experience supporting kids and their families in both the private and public school sector. She's also a licensed marriage and family therapist, supporting clients experiencing anxiety, depression, and post-traumatic stress, sexual identity questions, life career transitions, and aging. She's the co-division leader of the OT department at the Center for Connection here in Pasadena, and she's also the co-director of the Center for Connection and Neurodiversity in Duarte, California, which is part of the flagship center in Pasadena. So, Olivia, take it from here.
Thank you so much. Okay, so I'm going to divide my attention to the large crowd that showed up tonight and the camera. I'm really excited to present today because, and I know lots of people say they're super excited, but I have a particular reason why I'm excited. I'm excited because this is my first in-person presentation since COVID. So in March of 2020, I was scheduled to go and give nearly the same presentation to a school and their parents in Michigan. And so I was scheduled to leave the week that we shut down. And so leading up to my departure, there was all these conversations and emails going back and forth, like, do you still feel like you should come? Should we shut down? Whatever. And then we know the rest is history. But in my preparation for that presentation, I had put together this PowerPoint, and it was real robust and lots of information, and there was just lots of words and slides and all kinds of things to talk about what we're going to talk about today, which is emotional regulation. And the questions I was receiving from the school and these families were, how do we make our home more calm? How do we manage some of the ebbs and flows of emotions and behaviors and mood swings? And then why is this happening in the first place? And how do I deal with it? And so, as I was telling Cheryl, when I went to set up this presentation today, I just assumed my PowerPoint was sitting there, and I got that dreaded response that said, unrecoverable document or whatever, and freaked out. And so I had to redo my presentation, which was fine, because what I realized is that to answer that question of what do we do, how do we manage emotional regulation, and what are all of the tools and strategies we need, I think that it comes down to what we are seeing in our kids is regulation, period, full stop. Like, that's it. And so that's what we're going to talk about today. And what I want to do first is talk about what regulation is. And so regulation is a brain and body state. It is the state of our nervous system. And so what I want to do is I want to have, there we go. There's my brain. There's the brain. So it's a brain state. So what I want to do right now is have you guys check in with yourself. Really ground yourself, feel your feet on the floor, and start to think, like, is your heart beating fast? Are you breathing fast or slow? Are you hungry? Are you, try to just do like a body scan and answer the question, what is your nervous system feeling like right now? Do you feel regulated or do you feel dysregulated? How do you feel? So at this particular moment in the presentation, what I would do is ask you all, everybody here, to think of a song in their head. So start thinking about a song in your head. Now, this song has to be a song that you know all the words to. So start thinking about a song in your head that you know all the words to. I'll give you a couple minutes or a couple seconds to think in. Okay. Do you guys have a song that you can, pretty much sing all the words to? Okay. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to call you up and you're going to stand here and you're going to sing the song.
Oh boy.
Well, what happened? We were all just regulated. Now what happened? So start thinking about the song and the words, and I'm going to call you up one by one, and you're going to sing the song. And remember, this is on camera, so people are going to see it, and it's going to be, it's going to live in electronic forever. So, who wants to come up and sing a song? Man, they're all clamoring. What the audience doesn't know is everyone's raising hands. Raising hands. Okay, so what I would ordinarily do in a large audience of people is I would call 3 or 4 people up and have them stand here with me. And I would talk to them about what they were currently feeling. So, but let me ask you guys, how is your heart feeling when I said we're gonna stand up here and sing the song out loud? What did your heart immediately do?
Mine sped up. Yeah.
Okay. Same.
Yes.
Okay. So now I did this activity at a school one time, and in front here were like the drama people, and so they were like, "Yes, I want to go," and I'm like, "That totally backfired. Never mind." But what typically happens is, and I did this in a room full of teachers once, and what typically happens is one person is like, "I got to go to the bathroom." Boom, they're gone. Right, leave the room. Everybody averts their eyes, don't look at me as I'm going through, and I'm like, okay, I'll pick you, and I'm going to pick you, and people, revert their eyes. But I start to ask, how is your body feeling? Heart beating fast, maybe cold and clammy, pit of the stomach feeling, butterflies. And so what I did, and hopefully the audience who's watching this later can put yourself in that position where you are put on the spot. And the point of that is to show you what dysregulation is. And dysregulation is not just of the brain, but it is of the nervous system. And it's a nervous system response, and it goes throughout the body. And so there is something called the polyvagal nerve that is in the brain, and it's the only nerve that leaves the brain and innervates with all kinds of different things, your lungs, your stomach, your liver, and all of those things. So that when we get excited or we get dysregulated, that nerve goes ding, 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 and starts to work in all different places. And so we see the nervous system response. Maybe that person did need to get up and go to the bathroom, got dysregulated. I got to go. But this is, those kids that maybe your child is, Mommy, my stomach hurts. Daddy, my head hurts. Maybe not really feeling, we're not really knowing what that feels like, or dysregulation can happen dysregulation can manifest in all different ways. And so it's important just to know what regulation is, and that's the nervous system being in a state of homeostasis. And then what does dysregulation look like? And what does dysregulation look like for your own child? Because regulation is very personal, and dysregulation is also personal. Because looking out into the audience, maybe one person really looks dysregulated. Maybe their legs started to shake, or, they're slapping their pencil. But I might be looking back at you, and you're, very serious face, and you're just looking at me, but your heart might be racing a million, dysregulation looks differently. So it's important also to have our kids tap into their bodies and know what dysregulation feels like for them. Okay, so I love this chart, and I show this chart to every parent that I do parent consultations with, and because this is exactly what I did to you guys is what this chart is. So basically, you guys were hopefully all in the green zone when you entered here, and you were sitting down, and you were like, I'm just going to sit here and listen to this and, take it all in. I'm in the green zone. And when a child is in the green zone, or when we are in the green zone, we are feeling safe and secure and open to new things. We're open to making mistakes. We're open to, we're not as easily frustrated. We feel this we have all the reserve to be able to do new things, try new things, learn new ideas. So this is where we want our kids to live their life. We want them to live in the green zone. So what I did to everybody basically is I put you into dysregulation, which is in this fight or flight mode, right? And you would be surprised. I'm not joking. I did this in a room full of teachers. I had a gentleman go, like, very angrily, I will not get up. And, because I of course pointed him out and said, come up, because I wanted to target what was going on with him. And he was like, no, I'm not going, no, absolutely not. And he got mad, he got angry. And so he was in fight. And then the woman that's like, I'm out, and she went to the bathroom, and I could see her peeking in, like, was it safe to come back in? And then she came and joined the party. It was really funny. But what I hear a lot from parents who are experiencing kids with emotional dysregulation, or that emotional, back and forth, and feeling like the parents feel like they're walking on eggshells sometimes, is this little wavy line where kids are in and out of the green zone, and that can feel dysregulating for everybody. But what I want to point out is that when kids are triggered, they go into this fight or flight, and there's biological responses going on. Chemicals are getting released, and this is like, I'll ask you guys, like, when I said, okay, I'm going to call you up one by one and sing a song, could I have persuaded you in some way? Like, I brought Halloween candy because there's so much of it at my house. Like, could I have persuaded you and said, okay, I'm going to give you this Musketeer bar if you would just tell your heart to slow down and not beat fast, right? It's a physiological response. And thank God, because if we're confronted with a bear, for example, it is this response, thankfully, that will get us out of that situation. We will turn and run, and our bodies, I asked my husband once if he had any examples of a situation where he was in fight or flight. And he's like, don't you remember the time that I was fly fishing? And I was like, oh God, should I have remembered this? I should have remembered this story, and I didn't. But he was fly fishing up here in the mountains, and he was all done, and he picked up his stuff, and he turned around, and about 3 feet from him was this giant bear. And he said that he didn't even, not one moment of thinking, he dropped everything, turned and ran. And he said it wasn't until he got to the car that he was like, I couldn't have told you what path I took. I just ran. And, thank God for our fight or flight. This is our primitive responses that are coming from our downstairs brain, from our lower brain. And so it's what we need to keep ourselves safe. But it gets triggered from time to time, just like I triggered you guys. And so you go up into fight or flight, and then look at everything that happens in your nervous system. That's why I show not just the brain, but the body, because look at everything that's going on here. Your adrenaline's pumping, your heart rate, oxygen circulation to vital organs, but then also your digestion decreases. So sometimes we have kids that are like, oh, my stomach hurts. And you're like, okay, what just happened? What's going on here? And then we'll talk about the immune response in a bit. But anyway, so you go up into fight or flight, and then sometimes you go into this like shutdown, or, feeling of this hopelessness, or some kids, I have even seen disassociation, where, a kid has really lost their business, just maybe tore up their bedroom, and you're like, what? You're having a conversation afterwards, like, what happened? They're like, I don't know. And that's because they've experienced such emotional responses that they're actually disassociating, like separating themselves to keep themselves safe. So what's important about this is kids, or us, we should live here, maybe on occasion visit up here, but we should not live here and visit here. And so when you see a child having a meltdown or having an emotional response that you're like, whoa, that does not match, like me not cutting the crust off of your bread should not have created this, but it did. Like, what is going on? And so what's important is recognizing that if they go up, they need to come down. And so we also need to give them space to calm down, because right about, when they start like calming down and they stop screaming, or they stop like stomping their feet and I hate you, once they've stopped that, usually that's when we start in on the, well, what other choices could you have made? And what are things that you could have done? Blah, blah, blah. We still have to wait for them to come back into the green zone. So now that they're open for the information. And we'll talk a little bit more about what to do. But if you have a child where you feel like you are always walking on eggshells, you are living on this wavy line, or you are feeling like your child is very quick to fight or flight, then that is a child under chronic stress, and that impacts like immune response and all kinds of things. We don't want a child in chronic stress. And if you think your child's in chronic stress, that's the time to sort of reach out to people and really dig in and try to find the why. Why is that happening? Nope. Okay, so let's talk about triggers. And it could be a trigger or like lots of triggers. There could be lots of little things. And so let's talk about, I think they're all up here. Okay, we're just going to go one by one, and I'll give like a brief synopsis. So One of the big things that we do, when I have my OT hat on, my occupational therapy hat on, is I do a deep dive into sensory processing. We are all sensory beings, and we all have different sensory profiles. So I might ask you questions about your sensory profile, and you might say, gosh, I cannot stand when I'm in a large crowd and all of that sound, or I cannot wear wool, or I can't, fill in the blank. So we all have different sensory tendencies and profile. And so our brains are like computers. And so sensory information is happening all around us all the time. Our body is getting feedback. I'm standing upright because of my vestibular system. My feet are planted on the floor, and I know my feet are planted on the floor. And more importantly, like if I do this and someone said, Olivia, how are your feet situated on the floor? It is my proprioceptive system that says, your right foot is crossed over your left foot. I don't even need to look down to see that. It's my proprioceptive system that's giving me feedback to let me know that that's where my body is. So why this is important is because our kids are processing sensory information, and they have different sensory profiles. And so it is important to know about your child's sensory profile. So how do you do that? You really want to listen in. If they're constantly saying, man, it's loud in this house or whatever, and you're going, no, it's not, it's fine. Well, really kind of pull that apart. Tell me more about, when is it loud? How is it loud? Or if they're constantly telling you something smells and you're like, I don't smell anything. But that's something that our kids are going, let's just say they're going to school, right? That's their main occupation. They're going to school, and they've got a certain brain and body budget all day long. And so if they're navigating some sensory triggers all day long, so then their budget gets withdrawal. Right? And so then they don't have the capacity to, when they get home and you haven't, buttered their bread correctly, they go into meltdown. So we have to look at what's going on sensory wise. When we talk about sensory, we talk about like 5 or 6 main ones. This is something that's new, but really being talked about now, and I love it so much. It's called interoception, and it's basically the awareness of the cues that are going on inside your body. So do you know if your bladder is full or empty? Do is your bladder telling you that you need to go to the bathroom when you need to go to the bathroom? Or are you waiting too long? Is your heart beating fast? Is your stomach empty or full? Like, that's interoception, is knowing the body cues and being able to act on that appropriately. Intrusive thoughts. So these are things that, like, I need to do this perfectly. If I don't do it perfectly, then I'm not okay. All of those thoughts that swirl through their heads and our heads. But I'm thinking of our population of kids, and I know that perfectionism is a real thing, and our kids in particular really strive for perfectionism, and then when they don't hit perfectionism, they really take that onto themselves as though they're not okay, or they haven't done well. So intrusive thoughts can be a trigger. Shame, and the difference between shame and embarrassment is shame is the thought of that something is intrinsically wrong, like something is is wrong with me and my being. So that's shame. And this, I see this a lot. I see this a lot in kids, and kids going into this like shame spiral. So they can be triggered by someone saying something, and it just really shames them. And I want to talk specifically about feeling untethered. And I feel like some of our kids that are in the gifted status feel untethered. And I've worked with lots of kids who meet this profile, but feeling like they don't belong to this group, they don't belong to that group. And so they feel sort of just this like untetheredness. And so I think this is really important, and one of the triggers that I see often with some of our kids, like not feeling like they can fit into any one group, and maybe not feeling understood certain places. The other thing I want to say about intrusive thoughts, and I wanted to go back to this super quickly, is something that actually one of my clients had mentioned to me, and it was like aha moment. He was so good at so many things, and then he was not good in like a few things. And it really bothered him that he was like, I'm so good at all of these things. Why aren't I good at everything? And really pulling that apart for him made such a difference that I was like, you don't need to be good at everything. And we're, some things come very easily to you, like math or robotics or whatever. And some things you need to learn and be taught and practice and that sort of thing. So the intrusive thoughts of like, I'm good at this stuff, so I should be good at everything is not a good thought to have. Like, let that go in and out of your head. And then trauma. And some of our kids have experienced capital T trauma, and some of our kids have experienced lowercase t trauma. And so all of those things can be triggers along the way, and the trigger can happen, and we see that, going up into fight or flight. But I want to go and take a little bird walk. So I like my little bird. So my really good friend and co-director coined this phrase. She didn't make it up, but she says, when I'm telling a story, she's like, oh, you're going on a bird walk, which means that like I'm telling a story, there is a theme, and then I'm doing like this little bird walk to the side. Like it's related, but I'm follow me over here for just a second. So this is a bird walk. Because I think it's connected to the triggers, and particularly the trigger of that like trauma. Well, no, with a lot of those boxes. So what we need to realize about, and then there was COVID. I think we put kids back into school, and we didn't do. I hate talking about this in general. Well, maybe in generality, like, I don't think we did enough to repair and recover and talk about the experiences that we experienced of the COVID shutdown. And I think that for some, it was capital T trauma. For others, it was lowercase trauma. But I think we need to identify at the very least that the school closure and like this, the world closure was something that has impacted our kids, and we don't quite know the extent of it yet. But I think we at least need to recognize or call it into the room and say, this happened. And so what makes adults different than the kids is that we have the tools. We've lived a good number of, decades, and we have the tools to have managed, some of us better than others, but managed the trauma of the shutdown or the experience of the shutdown. But kids don't have those tools in their back pocket. This was wild, a wild experience. And so what I'm hearing is from a lot of parents is that kids are really struggling when they got back into in-person learning or in-person situations, that new things have popped up. And so what I want to say about that is our sensory demands, or their sensory demands, were different in the world closure, and their sensory systems and their brains were developing. And so their sensory system demands were different in that, where, they went from really busy classrooms, really loud, to really quiet places in their homes. And, everything was very different. And so I'm seeing I'm hearing a lot of families and parents coming and saying, we didn't have this experience before, but now our child's really having difficulty wearing certain clothing textures, or they're saying that things are, too loud, or having some auditory sensitivities that they didn't have before. So I think the sensory demands was different, and then different social expectations. And I think a few of us were talking right before, like even adults are having, kind of these meta conversations with our own self, going, man, I feel sort of unpracticed in the social situations, and I've got to get back on the horse, so to speak. So I think it's important to bring up life after COVID and how that impacted us. Okay, so we talked about dysregulation, but how is this manifesting? How do I know if it's dysregulation? And one of the big things that we talk about at the Center for Connection is knowing when something is bottom up or top down. And bottom up, meaning it's our lower brain basically driving the bus, and our primitive lower brain, that fight or flight response. Is that what we're seeing, or is it a top-down response? Meaning, the child is in full control of their behavior. They're fully, understanding everything that they're doing, and their behavior is a bit more intentional. I would say that as a parent of 3 and having worked with children for the 2 decades of my career, that the majority of what we see is bottom up. And so what we like to refer to as like this iceberg effect. And so, what we see outside of the water is the tip of the iceberg. And so what do we see? We see difficulty getting started, inattention, quick to anger, easily frustrated, mood swings. And you parents watching this, and you can insert whatever, yelling, arguing, constantly snapping at your brother or sister or whatever, preferring sameness, which means I just want to wear the same clothes every day, or I want to eat the same food every day, or I really just want to, preferring or being more rigid around certain things is things that we see. And then hypervigilance, another thing that we're hearing a lot about is separation anxiety. So Mom, where are you going? Mom, are you going to pick me up after school? Dad, what time are you going to be here? All of that stuff. So some of that hypervigilance, but that happens when you're in that fight or flight mode. You're like our primitive brain is like trained to keep us on guard all the time. So what we need to do is then look at what's below the iceberg. What is really fueling what we see above? And so I just brought in the 6 squares, but then some more. So like sensory, interoception, feeling untethered, feeling the perfectionist coming into play, trauma, shame. And then I added underlying neuro differences. And so, if there are underlying neuro differences, meaning that the brain just thinks and operates differently than neurotypicality or the majority, then that is something to keep in mind. And then a mismatch of demand versus capacity. So remember way back when we were talking about sensory in that top square, and we were saying that the child sort of leaves our house every day with a brain-body budget. Well, if that budget, which is the capacity, is low and the demand is high, and those two things don't match up, then we've got all of this space to really see some dysregulation. So what we want to do is try to match that as best as possible. But if we recognize that our child's capacity is low, then our demands need to be low. And that doesn't mean that we can't build up, but what builds resilience is doing this, and making sure that those match up as best as possible. Ooh. Okay, so now what? So we've asked sort of all of these questions. We've thrown out all of these ideas. Regulation is a nervous system state. Dysregulation is when our nervous system gets like sort of tipped off balance, and we're having all of these responses. We go up into fight or flight, sometimes disassociation, and bringing it back to fight or flight. Like, have you guys ever been in a situation where you've just been so raging mad, and you're driving home, and then you get home, and you're like, I should have said this, and I should have said that, and I should have said this, and why didn't I say this? This was like the thing I should have said. Well, that is that fight or flight. You went up into fight or flight. Your primitive brain was driving the bus. When your primitive brain is driving the bus, the top of your brain goes offline. It's like someone unplugged the plug and you are now offline. So having those sequential thoughts and, I should have done this, or I should have solved this problem this way. Your brain's, the top of your brain is not talking to the bottom of your brain. And so that's why that happens. Okay. So now what? What can we do? So my amazing friend is an artist, and I was telling her about like a story, but also like she was asking me like, what are you guys doing, and what's your main message or whatever. And she drew this awesome picture, and I just feel like it depicts exactly what us as parents are supposed to do, which is when your child is losing control, when you see your child getting dysregulated. And let me take a bird walk. I'll take a bird walk. Let's take a bird walk. So a lot of the times I hear from parents, my child goes from 0 to 60. They just lose their business. I don't even know. They go 0 to 60. There was no indication or whatever. So what I teach parents to do is to be able to be detectives and be curious, but also understand and identify what their child looks like regulated and what does the child look like dysregulated. So some of the things that we look at for dysregulation is looking at their body. So their body positioning. So do you see shoulders go up? Do you see fists clench? Do you see, are they stiff? Are they standing stiffly? Or do you just see them kind of like laying all over the place? So what is their body position like? That's number one. Number two, what is their movement like? Do they get rigid? Do they, start stomping around? Do they start touching everything? Or do they start moving fast and quick, and everything is very quick and impulsive? So that's number two. So body position is number one. Number two is movement. Number three is does their voice change? Does the pitch of their voice change? Do they start talking with like a lower voice, a quieter voice, a whisper, or is it like super unmodulated and I'm talking way up here? And does their voice pitch change? And then I look at their face. What is their face doing? Are they clenching their jaw? What are they doing with their face? And then I look at their eyes. So are they squinting their eyes? Are their eyes really big? What's going on? And parents, I want to, and all of those 5 things, by the way, can be found in Mona Delahook's book, Beyond Behaviors, which is a phenomenal book, easy, quick read. We make our interns read it before they come and intern with us. That's how important this book is. But parents don't trust their intuition, and I think we're not encouraged to sometimes. And so I would just encourage everyone to really trust their intuition. And so when you see these things changing, that's when you jump in and you go, okay, you're on your way to dysregulation. How do we re-regulate you? How do we hold on and tether you down? How do we make you feel safe so that when you're feeling like your brain is getting hijacked or you're losing control, we're here to sort of hold you down, and we're going to navigate the situation together. Okay, so what can we do? So I know in those moments, I've experienced them myself as a parent, but also walking with many, many parents through these, it can be scary, because I know that some of the people watching now are like, well, this isn't that bad. And then some parents that are watching, or maybe watching, going, oh my gosh, we're having daily meltdowns in the morning or at night. And we cannot live like this anymore. And so when you hit uncertainty, start to drop your anchors in the things that you know for certain. Because in those moments, you're like, what did that book say? And what did that, person say? And da-da-da. And you're like, where do I start? And what do I, whatever. Drop your anchor And one of the anchors I'm giving you tonight is it is all regulation. It is the nervous system. And when it is the nervous system, then half the battle is won. We don't need to go much further except to know that it is dysregulation. Think of that chart in your head and go, okay, little Bobby is up in fight or flight. This is dysregulation. And once you know it's dysregulation, then you know what to do, and you're going to be the tool. I know it sounds bad to call yourself a tool, but you're actually a tool. So what you're going to do is you're going to co-regulate, which means that two nervous systems up in the red and up in the blue do not make one regulated nervous system. So you're going to stay in the green and you're going to co-regulate. So that means you're holding this down and you're going to, and this is why I put this picture here, you're going to stay to the right. So when you know that your child's in dysregulation, stay to the right. Just think of yourself like stay in the right lane, because the right lane of the brain is your emotional brain. And so that's where your child is. Your child's in the right brain and they're feeling all these emotions. And we're going to say yes to the emotions because we're saying yes to their lived experience. We may be really mad about the behavior or the thing that they did while they were frustrated or angry or whatever, but you're going to say, I know you're frustrated. Yes, you can be frustrated, but you may not hit your brother. But yes, you can be frustrated. So we're going to say yes to the emotions and we're going to validate the emotions. When the child is now down and has rode that wave and is now back down in the green zone, then we can go to the left side of the brain and we can be logical and we can talk through it and, okay, tell me what happened and what could you have done differently? That's the time to bring in the lesson, to bring in our teachings and all of that stuff. But as parents, we get triggered. Our fear response goes up and we're like, oh my gosh, if she or he doesn't learn this lesson, then they'll be like this forever. Well, the best thing you can do is say yes to the emotion and then wait until they're in the green zone, back into the green zone, and truly back in the green zone. Not just like when they're halfway down, but all the way down. And that might be hours later or the next day. That's okay. Hey, can we talk about what happened yesterday? You got really, really upset when your brother did blah, blah, blah. It's okay for you to be upset, but next time, please don't throw a whole glass of milk in his face. That kind of thing. What could you have done differently? I could have, or this is exactly what I talked to a parent today. The kid turned and said, well, I told you he was being too loud. And the parent, and I said, did he tell you that? And she said, yeah, he did. And I said, what did you do? And she's like, oh, I told him it was okay. And I said, hold on a minute. What do we know about his his sensory system? We already know that he's saying that he's sensitive, and he's telling you. Was it okay that he threw milk at his brother? No. But we want to say yes to your experience and what could we have done differently? And mom, what could you have done differently in the situation? I could have listened to him and trusted that his experience was true, that his brother was bothering him. So anyway, another anchor. Is this a top down or is this a bottom up versus top down? So one of the examples I give of a top down behavior is, Mom, can I have a Snickers bar for dinner? No, you may not have a Snickers bar for dinner. What do you mean? And the whole meltdown and you're the worst mom ever. That would be top down behavior. But like with this, what happened at dinner yesterday with my client and the milk and the brother and the whatever, that would be a bottom up situation. Okay, stay in the right, then go to the left. Normalize experiences, particularly with this group of kids, is normalizing. Because one of the things that we do as parents is we try to take the hurt away, and in doing that, we don't validate their experience, and we also don't normalize that. And so, like, if a kid's feeling untethered, like, I don't feel like I fit into any one group, you know, the mother instinct instinct in me is to say, yes, you do. You have this guy and this friend and da-da-da. And what I want to say, what we should say is, it feels normal. That's normal to feel that way. And I can see how you could feel that way because, you know, you're at school, but maybe you're not feeling like you fit in there because, you know, your friend group isn't really interested in talking about microbiology. But then you go over here and maybe this friend group can talk about microbiology, but they're not interested in the baseball game that you just played the other night. And so normalizing that as opposed to, like, you know, trying to put out that fire and fix it. And then the last thing is I put independence question mark. I think as parents, right, we have this like unwritten goal that our kids have to be independent. What I want to reframe for you is that independence can look like advocating for yourself, knowing how to ask for help, when to ask for help, know the kinds of supports that they need. And so, you know, a lot of the times parents, I'm like, what's your goal? And the parents will say, oh, I want him to be independent in this or that. But we all use strategies and tools. We all use things like, you know, I have this up here today to remind me of the things that I wanted to for sure say. And I don't think anyone would be like, oh, look how weak she is. She's referring to this, right? And so making sure that it's not bad to want our kids to be independent, but also we have to give them tools and strategies. So like if my son cannot for the life of him remember to feed the dog, and every day I'm going, feed the dog, and it's an argument and it's a pattern and it's a whatever, then I'm going to stop and say, okay, I don't want to argue with you anymore. The dog needs to be fed. How can I help you remember to feed the dog and come up with a strategy? That's not bad. That's good, because then we can help our kids figure out other ways and strategies and tools to use when they come up against a hard and challenging place. Okay, I think that is it. I have discussion up there if you want to give any scenarios or thoughts or questions. Otherwise, I really appreciate your time and being here. I love it. Awesome.
Thank you.